The last region of the brain is the forebrain, and this is actually one of the largest sections of the brain. It comprises over 90% of the actual brain itself. But this is the site at which the most complex centers for our most complex behaviors and mental processes actually exist, and where a lot of these functions take place. And when we compare the forebrain of various mammals and amphibians and avian creatures, we notice that the human forebrain is considerably larger and a lot more crinkled and dense when compared to other animals. So again, this certainly, our language capacities, our capacity to experience very complex emotions, to be able to envision things that have never actually existed, artists and poets, this is, largely governed in the forebrain. Now, one set of structures in the forebrain is known as the limbic system, and it is a set of structures, and it's a very complex network. It borders around the brainstem, and it plays a very critical role in learning and memory and in our emotional experience, and kind of in turn our sense of emotional control. One of the first structures within the limbic system is the hippocampus, and its primary function is the formation of new memories. It takes short-term memories and converts them into long-term memories. So when it's been a little while and we haven't reviewed our notes for general psychology for a little while, we can pull back, we can remember some of the things talked about in lecture. It's a long-term memory, and it's the hippocampus that's able to take this information and put it into long-term format so we can recall it later on. And this is actually the site of neurogenesis in adults. Okay, so this is a site where new neurons are created. And so the way I kind of word associate, and you may think this is silly, but when I'm trying to think about what is it the hippocampus does, well, I think about hippos going to campus. And, we go to campus to learn things, and, in order to be able to learn something, you have to be able to form a memory of it. So I think of hippos going to campus, or come up with something much more original than that, and I can use that for future classes. So if you were to ask what would happen if there were damage to the hippocampus, if damage were to occur, and this has occurred in a few very notable case studies throughout history, it would impair your ability to take in any new information and retain it. And so if you've ever seen the movie 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore, that would be sort of an example, although not really a very accurate portrayal of a memory disorder. But somebody who has damage to their hippocampus has trouble forming new long-term memories. And so that's another thing you can use to remind yourself when you're looking at this word on the exam and trying to remember what it means. Okay, so hippocampus and memory. The next brain structure in the forebrain within the limbic system is the thalamus. Now the thalamus, actually the cell bodies of it, they process and distribute your motor and your sensory information, except for smell. That is its own separate system. And it sends this information to and from the cerebral cortex. Basically, all information that goes into your brain first passes through the thalamus, and any response from the brain that's sent out to either your glands or your muscles also has to pass through the thalamus. So it's basically one huge relay station for all incoming and outgoing information in your brain. And it's sort of like a traffic cop. If anybody's ever passed through a part of town where the lights were down and actually witnessed a traffic cop directing traffic, that's what the thalamus does. It's essentially directing the information to go to its various appropriate regions of the brain, where the brain will interpret that information. Okay, the next structure within the limbic system, we've actually already talked about it, but we're talking about it again, is the hypothalamus. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the hypothalamus, it's unique in that it is both an endocrine gland because it produces hormones, but it is also a brain structure in that it produces neurotransmitters, and it has very specific function in that it regulates many of our biological drives. It also regulates both divisions of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And so the hypothalamus, so to speak, it acts as like a temperature or a thermometer. So for example, if the experience of hunger happens whenever our blood sugar starts to get too low, the hypothalamus senses this and then signals other areas of the brain to release leptin and some other hormones that then trigger hunger sensations, and you get those hunger pangs. And that's basically the hypothalamus telling you that, hey, you're getting too low on energy, it's time to fuel up. And so the hypothalamus ultimately, in many ways, is also trying to help the brain achieve homeostasis, that balance within the body. So it also serves as the link between the nervous system and the endocrine system. Do remember that, and that it indirectly regulates secretion of hormones, so it means it controls the endocrine system. And it also releases neurotransmitters and hormones that can affect the pituitary gland, neurotransmitters that can affect the nervous system. The last structure in the forebrain and within the limbic system is known as the amygdala, and this is one structure that we will probably refer back to again throughout the semester. Now, the amygdala, it is an almond-shaped clump of neuron cell bodies located here, and it is involved in our emotional responses, particularly negative emotional responses such as fear, disgust, and anger. And I'm talking about anger to the point of rage. When somebody becomes livid, the amygdala is in full-fledged response. Now, if this particular region of the brain were damaged, what would probably happen is you would probably lose your sense of fear, and I'm talking any kind of fear. And now some people might, think, and, understandably, that this would be in general a very positive thing, that it would be a positive thing to want to, reduce fear or maybe even get rid of fear altogether. But fear serves a very important purpose, and the ability to fear serves an evolutionary advantage in that if I learn to fear things that I should legitimately fear, such as, peering over a cliff where I have nothing to hold on to, that is a legitimately scary situation because I might fall to the ground and die, and I could no longer go on and contribute to the human evolutionary history. So that's a legitimate case of fear, and somebody who has no sense of fear might be a lot more inclined to engage in very risky behaviors, and unfortunately as a result be a lot more likely to be killed as a result. So fear is a healthy thing, so we don't want damage to the amygdala. But the stimulation of the amygdala, if I actually send electrical impulses into the amygdala, it will trigger an anger or fear response depending on the individual. And people who have impulse control disorders, people, for example, who have obsessive compulsive disorder or they're compulsive hoarders, people with anger management issues tend to have very overactive amygdalas because they have such a very strong fear response or become very, very angry and enraged if they're put into a fear state of mind. So the amygdala does play a very big role in a lot of human emotional experience, and unfortunately because a lot of human emotional experience has the potential to be very negative.